Moving on. Moving on to Therapeutic Thursday with hopefully some more words that are a lot easier for me to pronounce. And I know there are because this is about EMDR. And I know EMDR. And it was brought up by a community member. They went to their a neuropsychologist for cognitive testing. And this happened to me as well. And the reason was because the belief is that we're experiencing pump head. Now, pump head is real for some community members. I mean, the struggle is real. We're talking about short-term memory loss, inability to put together sentences. That word is right there on the tip of your tongue. This is not the typical stuff that happens as we age. This is stuff that happens following open heart surgery, not for an emergency dissection only, but just open heart surgery in general. When you've been on the bypass machine, people are finding that they're struggling to process, they're struggling to complete sentences, they're struggling to remember sometimes where they're going. Did they shut the garage door? A wide variety of things. I used to turn the oven on and I couldn't remember why I turned the oven on. So I'd have an alarm set to remind me, or maybe it was I was cooking rice on the stovetop. I'd put an alarm on and then I would be like, what's that beeping? I didn't even remember that I was boiling water, whatever the case may be. It was bad. And so we chalk it all up a lot of times to this pump head, which again is real. I'm not saying it isn't real. However, what myself and this community member found by going to a neuropsychologist was that a lot of these short-term memory and processing issues can actually be caused by anxiety and caused by post-traumatic stress. Doesn't have to be a disorder, just post-traumatic stress in general. Any kind of anxiety that is caused from trauma, and this includes health or medical trauma. So again, some of this forgetfulness and anxiety may not be because you were on a heart-lung machine or a bypass machine. It can be that you've been now left in this state full of anxiety, full of worry, full of medical trauma, and it's impacting your brain as well. So let's talk about this article. According to Health News, there was an article written by Jana Nickert, who's an MFT, called EMDR Psychotherapy. And is it the quickest way to treat PTSD and anxiety? So in order to figure that out, we kind of need to know what EMDR is. And it's actually defined as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a form of talk therapy, yes, it is, because you do have to do some talking before you actually get into the hands-on therapy. But research has actually shown that this particular type of therapy is very effective at treating trauma and post-traumatic stress disorders. It also can be used to treat a variety of general anxiety disorders too. The length of therapy or the number of sessions that's needed to treat this trauma will actually vary from one person to another, depending on a variety of factors. So I know that it has been very effective in working with members of the military, and it's so effective. It's so scientifically based that a lot, if not the majority of insurance companies will cover this treatment. The question is, of course, can you find a therapist who will take insurance? That's a whole other situation, but it is scientifically based and backed therapy. And in this article, they actually talk a lot about EMDR, but I interviewed Amy Wagner, who is an LCSWC, and she specializes in and is credentialed to perform EMDR therapy. And you can click the link in this blog post to actually see that exchange between she and I on our AHTV YouTube channel. But for the most part, to explain to you what EMDR is in kind of like even more layman's terms than this article, at the end of the day, just like a computer, your brain downloads all of its experience, every experience it had all day long. 99.999% of it is run of the mill. It's the same thing, maybe a slightly deviated version. I saw a car driving down the road. I saw a person walking with an umbrella. I saw a cute dog. I ate food I didn't like, whatever the case is. It downloads it and it puts it into these appropriate folders on the shelf. Dog walking, ate food I didn't like, saw a car, the whole 9 yards. And then when something happens that's very different, Like, let's say you saw a car accident right in front of you and someone flies out the window, as horrible as that sounds, your brain's going to be alarmed by that because that doesn't happen all the time. That's different. And the hope is that your brain processes that appropriately and puts it into its file. But for some people who would walk away from that situation and obviously be jarred or traumatized by it, in that moment, you're smelling things, you're hearing things, you're seeing things, your brain just kind of, it's like a misfiring of wires. So when you go to sleep, which is when all this downloading takes place during your REM stage, your eye movement stage of sleep time, when your eyes are doing that back and forth motion is when all that stuff is getting downloaded. Something can go awry, and it's going to download that experience with bizarre emotions and responses attached to it. And so now what happens is the next time you see a car pull into that same intersection or anywhere, you may think you hear something, think you smell something. You may actually think you're seeing something, and none of those things are actually happening. But it triggers a response in you that's not great, doesn't feel good, might make you, kind of cower a little bit. It might make you feel sick to your stomach. It could make you have a headache. It could make you have nightmares if things got downloaded improperly. So think about people who have to have aortic dissection, people who need to have surgery and it's an emergency. Their brain doesn't really have time to process everything. You're already having some potential cognitive impairments as the blood flow's gone wonky. The body's going into shock. And so a lot of times we come out of that situation with PTS or anxiety or forgetfulness that becomes even more uh, you become even more forgetful and the anxiety grows because you're feeling anxiety. So because you're feeling anxious, you start to feel more anxious and it's this vicious cycle. And the more anxious your brain can be, the more forgetful one becomes. This is definitely connected. This is coming from my neuropsychologist because I am not a doctor. I'm just relaying to you information that's been told to me through interviews and through my own personal experience. So through my personal experience, it was suggested to me that based upon my cognitive testing, which was great, but based upon my symptoms of anxiety, nightmares, sweats, smelling things, hearing things, all of that, that I tried EMDR therapy. Again, through eye movement, you have an opportunity to desensitize yourself and reprocess the information that got downloaded. Remember when we talked about it at nighttime? So it forces you to be put in a situation where you have the same eye movement that mimics REM stage sleep, but you're awake. So what happened in my experience is I had a chance to talk all about this in the talk therapy portion with my therapist. And then when we were ready to engage in the actual EMDR, my version was holding paddles. And I say my version because sometimes to produce that eye movement, you just need to move your finger back and forth and have somebody look at your finger going back and forth. And then what happens? Your eyes are going back and forth. I didn't want to do that. My eyes get very dry. I know sometimes some therapists use a light that blinks back and forth, but other therapists don't want to do that because it could produce possible seizure um, in those that are prone to that. It's kind of like a strobe light effect. Mine was holding paddles. I closed my eyes. I was told to think about a period in time in my past that maybe I found bothersome or worrisome. And I thought about a time that was related to my dissection that I thought was the most bothersome. And I held my paddles and then they just kind of vibrate left and right and left and right. Now, when your eyes are closed, you're naturally going to look left and right because you're feeling a sensation, left side, right side. It would be the same as someone just tapped on the left or the right, or I did this to myself and just closed my eyes and tapped. My eyes are naturally going to move. After about, let's say it was 15, couldn't have been more than 30 seconds, we talked about what I felt, what it brought up. And through a variety of these sessions, multiple sessions of this in one sitting, what I discovered for myself is it really wasn't the dissection that was causing me a lot of stress. This was unprocessed medical trauma that goes way back to when I was 11 years old. I mean, probably further back than that. It's not hypnosis. It doesn't bring out memories that I didn't already know about. I just didn't relay them to this. I didn't connect it. And so the more I got to go through this process, the more I had a chance to download my memories and put them in a bucket with more appropriate emotions, more appropriate thought processes. And naturally, then what I experienced around my dissection was, it just wasn't as scary anymore. I don't know. It's kind of like just very strange how it works, but it works. I went from someone who I could walk into a room and it just took seeing anything that took me back, and I would smell alcohol all the time. I could hear beeping of the heart machine. I'm in my kitchen, so there's no reason why I should be smelling or hearing that. Or this could have happened in a mall. It could happen anywhere. If I saw an ambulance or I heard the siren, I put my car in park and I would be under the steering wheel. It didn't matter where I was. It happened so seamlessly and fast. It was very problematic, and I was having a lot of nightmares, especially nightmares about drowning. And once I started doing the EMDR, about 8 weeks or so, and it was hard. It was hard because it gave me headaches for a while. It was hard to go through all of this hard work. I'd say probably at least 90% of it just went away. Just it went away. It doesn't mean that I'm not aware that I still have some PTS in my life, but all of the things connected to it, the anxiety, the intense forgetfulness, really significantly reduced. And then I just implement games and tools on my phone and methods. Like if I'm having a really anxious roundup day and I go to shut the garage door, I touch the garage, and then I don't have to drive by my house 6 times to make sure that the garage door didn't spontaneously go up, right? Well, we've all had moments like that. But I've implemented tools to combat the remaining residual issues like forgetfulness and anxiety. I do recommend people going back in for a tune-up when you start to feel really overwhelmed with just life in general, because you don't want to have any of those triggers come back, but they do sometimes. Bottom line is EMDR worked, and it worked for me. I heard about it from community members, and then my neuropsychologist said, go try it. And it made a huge difference. And again, it is a little bit of hard work, but this can be used for anything. If you have a phobia of spiders, it could be used. I'm not trying that though, but I do have a phobia. But the point is people who do these techniques have to experience this for themselves. Not every therapist can do EMDR. You have to become certified in doing it, and therefore it has to be done to them to understand what you experience. It's not painful. It's not jarring. It's it it's so mild, and yet the results are so grand. So check out the video with the link here for YouTube. Listen to this therapist talk a little bit about it. Read the article. I'm curious to know if anybody has actually done this themselves. And I hope for those of you who are struggling that you do bring these issues to your physician's attention. Find a therapist that you connect with. There's other therapeutic ways of fixing PTS and anxiety other than EMDR. I mean, you can do cognitive talk therapy. There's a variety of therapies. I'm just telling you that I know that the EMDR worked very well for myself and other people. And if you are struggling, I hope you do reach out and get some support, because there's no reason to sit and struggle. All right. Therapeutic Thursday. There we go. I find my mouse.